All right, let's get into a really fascinating topic, the actual strategy behind winning an argument. Today, we're going to break down a playbook of 10 super powerful methods. And here's the secret. It's not always about being right. It's about knowing the game and communicating way more effectively.
Come on, we've all been there, right? You're sitting there, you've got the facts on your side, your logic is solid, but you still walk away feeling like you lost. So what if I told you it's often not about what you're arguing, but how you're arguing?
And that, right there, is the core idea we're talking about today. The second you stop thinking about just being factually correct and start thinking about strategy, you completely change the game. So, let's break down these tactics tier by tier.
Okay, let's start with what we're calling the C tier. Think of these as your fundamentals, your starter pack. They're pretty easy to pick up and use, but they give you a more limited kind of control. These are your essential building blocks.
First up is the judo technique. So instead of meeting an attack head-on, you kind of absorb it. You give a little ground, you concede a minor point, and that makes your opponent drop their guard. It makes you look reasonable, and that builds up your credibility for the one big point you really want to make.
Yeah, this quote really nails it. We usually think that giving any ground is a sign of weakness, but this flips that idea on its head. It's actually a sign of confidence. It shows you're not just digging your heels in, you're a thoughtful person.
Next, we have the contrast effect. Oh, this is a classic negotiation move. You start out by proposing something totally over the top, maybe even a little absurd. Naturally, they're going to say no. But then, when you present your real proposal, it suddenly seems incredibly reasonable in comparison. You've set the anchor, and now your idea looks like the perfect compromise.
And rounding out the C tier, we've got lightning jokes. Now, this isn't about becoming a stand-up comedian. It's about timing. A quick, sharp one-liner at just the right moment can totally knock your opponent off their rhythm and give you an opening to take back control.
Okay, let's level up to the B tier. These are the power plays. They're a bit more complex, a little more psychological, and they're all about grabbing the steering wheel and actively shaping where the conversation goes.
First, the Socrates technique. This one is so clever. Instead of just telling someone, hey, you're wrong, you lead them to that conclusion themselves. You just ask these calm, guiding questions that make them face the inconsistencies in their own logic. It's way more powerful because they start to doubt their own position, and you never even had to attack them directly.
This leads perfectly into hypnotic language. Just feel the difference here. You smell bad. Boom, defenses are immediately up. But now listen to this. I feel frustrated by your smell. See? It's not an attack anymore. It's you sharing your experience. Just by swapping you statements for I feel statements, you can completely change the tone and avoid an instant fight.
And then there's the Gish Gallop. This is basically a tactic of pure overwhelm. You just hit them with a fire hose of arguments, one after another after another. It works because of something called Brandolini's law, which says that the amount of energy it takes to refute nonsense is way, way bigger than the energy it takes to create it. Your opponent just can't keep up.
The last B-tier move is the coherence principle. You know, deep down, people really want to be consistent. So, you use that. You get them to agree on something small and obvious, point A, and once they've said yes to that, it becomes psychologically much harder for them to say no to point B without looking like they're contradicting themselves.
All right, now for the A tier, the dominators. These are the most powerful, and let's be honest, often the most aggressive techniques out there. These are for when you want to take total control of the narrative.
So, kicking off the A tier is information bombing. It's kind of like the Gish Gallop, but you're using a flood of dense facts, complicated data, and expert quotes. The goal isn't necessarily for them to understand everything, it's to make it impossible for them to respond to everything. Their silence on even one point can make it look like you're in complete command.
I mean, just looking at a slide like this is kind of exhausting, isn't it? You're getting hit with stats, data, studies. That feeling of being overwhelmed is exactly what the tactic is designed to do. It's basically an intellectual shock and awe campaign.
Next up, a true classic, the change of focus, or as you probably know it, the red herring. This one's simple, but man is it effective. You're losing, you feel backed into a corner, so you suddenly bring up something completely unrelated, but maybe a little emotional or controversial. Boom, the entire conversation shifts, and you've just escaped.
And finally, the rule of 3. There is something almost magical in our brains about the number 3. You know, 1 is a point, 2 is a line, but 3? 3 is a pattern. When you group your arguments into 3s, they just sound more complete, more structured, and way more convincing.
See, when you lay it out like this, it just clicks. It establishes a pattern. It brings structure and clarity, and it makes your point more memorable. It just feels right. So we've just covered 10 different tactics across 3 different tiers. That's a whole lot of moves. But just having a playbook, that's one thing. Knowing how to actually win is something else entirely.
So here it is, the entire tier list, all laid out. It's a powerful set of tools for sure, but the analysis suggests that the true master skill, the thing that ties it all together, isn't just knowing these methods.
And here's the most crucial point. A static playbook is basically useless. Every single person is different, and every situation is unique. The real art isn't just memorizing the moves, it's reading the room and knowing exactly which tool to pull out at exactly the right moment. In the end, there is one single ability that sits on top of all of this. It's more important than any one tactic. It doesn't matter if it's A tier or C tier, and that skill is adaptability. The power to shift your communication style based on who you're talking to and the situation you're in, that is what really makes all the difference. That's what separates the amateurs from the masters. Which leaves us with one last big question. This whole playbook is designed to help you win, but it's worth asking yourself, before you use any of these tactics, is your goal just to win the argument, no matter what? Or is it to actually find the truth? Because the answer to that question, well, that changes everything.